Good afternoon, and it's pretty cool to be here with so many smart, talented folks. My name is Chris Nielsen. I'm with a company called C&P Integrations, and Jonathan Neubauer is here and several other members of our team. This presentation will be kind of broken into two parts. The first part, we're going to talk a little bit about communities, building communities effectively, and the second part, which will be a case study around a portal that we built called Puget Sound for the state of Washington. And the second part will be about a rather large enterprise level news organization that we migrated from Drupal over to Joomla. Why? Because it's cool. So I'm going to start off with, let me see if I have this right. This, you know, we're a Joomla shop. We love Joomla. We do all kinds of great things. Both John and I are condensing our presentations from about an hour to half of that. So if I rush through something, feel free to catch up with me later. Or you know, we hope to start a conversation around building communities and about some of the ideas for improving the process for migrations from other platforms such as Drupal. So how many folks here are developers? Okay, how many folks are designers? How many folks want to build a Joomla community or have built a Joomla community? Excellent. Okay. The one thing, there's a couple kind of key things about communities that having built a few of them, that you, and you all know this if you've been involved with Joomla, you cannot control a community. You can influence a community, but you can't really control it. So once you let it out of the bag, you have to make sure that you're influencing it, babysitting it, making sure that it has everything that it needs to grow and nurture and become itself, whatever that may be. In a precursor to this presentation, when I gave it in Chicago, I put out a series of blog articles because this is about, you know, it's a case study about Puget Sound. However, there's a lot of kind of key points in asking the right questions. So I broke it down into 4 kind of segments. Start with a plan, make sure you're asking all the right questions, you know, using the right tools. There's a variety of great community building tools such as Joomla Social, Community Builder, and there's a few others. And so make sure you're using the right tools. Make sure it's the tools that are needed for the community that you want to build. Then there's the marketing and the outreach, how to communicate with your folks, how to inspire them, how to keep them coming back. And then if you want to sustain your community, you need to have some type of a revenue or a revenue stream, or perhaps if you're working with volunteers, you have to motivate those volunteers and steer them in a direction that's going to uplift your community. So Puget Sound, it was a pretty aggressive, well, what would be the right word? It was unique that a state organization would, at the time, would want to start embracing more with social technologies, community building, and that sort of thing. They had 300 plus organizations with anywhere up to about 3,500 members apiece that were all trying to collaborate around some of the ecological, environmental issues with the Puget Sound. There was Exxon Valdez, a big oil spill. There are a lot of other issues with rain runoff, et cetera, et cetera. So they had all been working in Google groups and all over the place and all these different tools. They wanted to consolidate it. They needed to gather a lot of information, and they have a lot of, given the fact that this was sponsored by a state organization, they had a lot of requirements for how they managed that information that they had to work with. I won't have time to get into all the details of all of the features that we built for them, but there were a lot of there were different user types. So they had the community organizers that were trying to coordinate activities and reach out to folks and share information. They had the folks that wanted to participate at a grassroots level, whether it's volunteering to run around and pick up trash or be part of some of the other initiatives that they were pushing out. So there were a variety of technical, some technical users. There were the novice users that, maybe get on the computer at the library once a year or something. So that was a real challenge in making sure that we had it somewhat easy for them to engage with, and that defined some of the tools that we had to think about with this. One of the biggest this was a 3-year contract. And one of the biggest challenges of this was the initial starting of the project. Amy, the lady knitting in the back, was our director of business development at the time, and she was out writing proposals, and she says, "Oh, I've got a great one. It sounds like it'll be a lot of fun, and it comes together in 7 days." I went, "Oh, you mean we only have 7 days to get this proposal together? I mean, that's a pretty short amount of time." "No, 7 days to build it." And I'm like, "Ooh, well." Luckily, we had a little bit of a lull at the time. We quickly put together a proposal, and we had a little bit more than 7 days, but 7 days was the date that the contract would be issued between when we had to make the delivery. So we had about a week or two beforehand, so we started doing what we call a distribution package, where we had started gathering some of the tools. Now, one of the challenges with that is that now today it's really neat because over the past couple years, a lot of the tools have evolved, and we probably would have made some different decisions about what tools to choose, and many of them have a lot of new, exciting features that I frankly really like. I think they're really cool. But things like event registration. Event registration was very important to them for their event management. That didn't exist in any of the tools. There were, and in a way that it would integrate with the user profile, okay? So at the time, what we had is we had 3 teams, each writing something to try and meet this requirement. So Mike Carson's team, he has Event Registration Pro. We were trying to glue that into a calendar, and we were trying to, somebody else was working on something unique with some other components. And luckily, kind of in the midnight hour, Jom Social integrated registration capabilities into their tools. So that made life a lot easier because then we installed it and upgraded it. We ended up doing a lot of modifications to Jom Social in this process. But the beauty is, of these 3 years, the first year was those 7 days of incredible adrenaline rush. We have a great team, and luckily they all came together to make that happen. So here's your delivery. Do not turn it on. Do not show it to anybody. It does everything according to this list, this Excel spreadsheet of list of features, but it's not ready for prime time. There's no real thought put into it. Okay? There was no discovery phase. There was somebody that said, okay, we're gathering grant information from all over the place, so we need to take care of all these people. That's why we have everything in the kitchen sink that's due or that needs to be into this. And then we put it into a proposal, and then we build it, right? Well, not going through that discovery phase with the client really was probably one of the bigger challenges with this whole project, because we didn't have the time to really say, why do you need that? You don't need that. And so we ended up building a lot of features and integrating a lot of stuff that they really are not using. They thought they needed it, it was important, and maybe it helped fund the project, but it really didn't add value. They wanted a wiki. We integrated a wiki. They don't use it. Nobody uses it. I can look at the login records. John and I logged into it. That's it. But, these are some of this goes back to the questions to ask up front. with them if you have that opportunity. The second year, we really went through a lot of that process and started going through the meat of the integrations that we had to do. And then the third year was really support and helping train the trainers. And the point that they're at right now, even though this is a 1.5 site, it will never be anything else because it is too complicated. It is its own piece of software. But it, now they're at the stage where they're out actually doing county by county training for the community to get them involved. And even there were a lot of great points made last night about we all as geeks love to have the latest and greatest. Well, if it works, that's okay. It doesn't need to be the latest and greatest. So this will have a good shelf life, and they're doing all the right things to really grow the community. So there were a lot of features that we had to put in to this with advanced search and probably one of the most challenging integrations was we bridged. How many of you are familiar with Project Fork? Okay, it's a nice little project management tool for actually by Carl Ledbetter for Joomla, and then Jom Social has a model where it uses groups. Well, they had been used to using Google Groups, and that's closer to the model in Jom Social, but they needed project management. Well, you've got two completely different data sets and mindsets of how to organize this information, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to have a group that was available to kind of the folks that wanted to, kind of the general user, registered user, and then they had the projects, which were the more advanced users, the program managers, the community organizers, and so forth. And they wanted to be able to link them so that the program managers could do all their work in the project management tool, but it's still linked to all the group activity and the activity streams and that sort of thing. So that was a big challenge, and so we added a little button, open project, it would go over, and there was a reciprocal back and forth between the two. But the complexity of the data model made that really enormous. The other, where they actually probably spent more than 25% of their budget, was on developing search capabilities that connected to all the components that we put in there. And I have a spreadsheet later, I'll show you that there's a lot of stuff that we put in there. So we again had to extend the event management. They wanted additional fields in Jom Social. They wanted to have it so you could click and get it in your iCal, have RSS feeds. We actually did several custom RSS feeds that spit out to other websites. Their idea was that everybody would put their calendar of events inside of this environment, and then you could extract it to whatever website. And if you have 300 organizations, that's a monumental task, aside from the technology side, to coordinate and inspire people to do that. But then we had to make it easy for them to be able to capture that information and put it into their portal. Given the fact that this was a state agency, there were a lot of issues related to privacy settings. They wanted to have it be like Facebook and some of the other portals where you would get notifications. So we built a pretty elaborate notification system for them. The problem is communities are like parties, okay? Nobody wants to be the first one there. You get there, hey, let's party. And nothing's going on. So these email notifications were actually, in the beginning, very annoying because you're getting notifications and nobody's done any activity, so it's a summary of all the activities. So they actually turned it off, and I guess they plan to turn it back on once they have a significant amount of activity in the system, which I've seen grown over the past few months. Kind of a neat little tool that we put together for them. Many of you have probably heard of Docsman, and we added some additional features. Baskin Robbins was the folks that inspired this, and then my Puget Sound got excited about the idea, so we kind of split the development costs between the two companies. But what it allowed them to do is to have, kind of in the Baskin-Robbins model, they use it a little differently. What they would do is they would have a restaurant, a group of restaurants, and they would want to have, they have like a marketing manager that has their favorite documents related to advertising campaigns, and they could select, a group of them and zip them up and email them out to somebody that's a new franchise and that kind of thing. So they would use it similar to that, where if they have a promotion or an initiative that they wanted to push out, if all the documents are in the repository, they can select 3, 4 of them, click a button, send out that email to, one or many folks. It was kind of a neat little piece of functionality. Moderately pretty, not pretty, but integrations. Well, they had a lot of newsletters, things that they needed to push out. Luckily, there was a really neat extension we used for integration with MailChimp. And let's see what else. Social analytics. There's a couple neat. I put some links down there. A couple neat tools for really kind of like Google Analytics for all of the social activities in your system. I'm pretty sure that they'll work in a 2.5 environment. They work great in a 1.5 environment, and it's really a neat way to be able to track the activity and the people coming to your site. Some of the biggest challenges with a project of this magnitude was really managing all of the extensions. Over the period of the few years that we did this, we had to go through a couple major upgrades of all of these extensions. So there's 150 plugins, 60 components, 95 modules, 20 plus very deep integrations. Now, this was a learning experience for us because we used to write change logs. All right, keep track of stuff because there was a lot to keep track of. And we used to manage all of the status of everything in spreadsheets. The spreadsheets were mostly of their design. They're a government agency. They're a little behind, and that's what they use. So that's what we needed to use. But we soon learned that we needed to get a SVN system in place because tracking all these changes, I had developers quit because they don't like to do change logs. They hate it. But making sure that all these documents were up to date was really a tedious, time-consuming process. Luckily, Amy is a master at spreadsheets. She was very helpful in that. What else do we have? Security was another issue. It was like the week before we're ready to offload the contract, make our delivery, everybody's happy, everything's working well, and I come in to do one little thing, and there's a big hacker page that shows up when I get there. It was on a Saturday morning. I'm like, oh, great. And what had happened is we had been doing some testing, and at this point it was off on their server. We've made Secure Live a mandatory requirement on our servers. We've actually partnered with that organization to really do some more things with security, and we're going to have a series of webinars that are going to be pretty interesting. If you poke back at our blog, you'll probably see more about that over time, and hopefully we'll continue our conversations because we're going to do the same thing with community building. Actually, we're partnering with Azrul and Nabil from Jam Social to create a series of webinars that will help educate people on and not just a one-way educational experience, because we hope to learn from it as well, to improve the tools, improve our processes for developing communities, but to really engage with helping people be able to create successful communities. If any of you are our other Joomla shops, which many of you are, you know that your success depends on the success of your customers. If you can't keep them and help them become more successful, you're not going to have a job because they're going to be out of business or find somebody else. So anyway, security you know, what had happened is we had set up a testing environment, and you know, a server admin thinking, oh, hey, that'd be cool. We'll just point, you know, a DNS over to a directory. Not a good idea, because that's just like, you know, a wide open door. And given that it's an older platform, it's a vulnerability. And we had and once they get into that directory, they can just go up a directory and get wherever. So security is a big thing. Think about it, and that's relevant to anything you do. So lessons that we learned in this process, really never skip a discovery phase. It was worth it for us to go through the pain of this process, because it was our first state contract, and it was nice. We could, you know, pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, we did it, and that helps us get the next one. So it's kind of like a sales process. What's the point of your sales pitch? To get the next meeting with your customer. Change logs. We happen to use a tool right now called Project Fork. We happen to like GitHub as a solution, and we'll probably be doing some other changes. But you know, regardless, use some type of a code repository that you can track these changes and keep it within perspective. And never be afraid to say, hey, I screwed up. Let me write this down and let me share it with the rest of my team, even with my customer, and let's make sure that we get better at this. Your customers will appreciate that honesty and forthrightness as well. Like I said, this got to a point in its evolution where they started making decisions of wanting more customizations. And once you get beyond a certain point, it's really hard. You just have to know when to say, hey, you are venturing into being your own software that you are going to have to manage and maintain, and you are stepping outside of being able to be supported really from the Joomla community. I can't go in and upgrade Jom Social. There's some groovy new features that they want, that they actually had us build in some cases that are better in the new software, but it would break something else if we took it out or upgrade it. So really avoid, when you're talking to your customers, getting too far into the weeds with that. There's a lot of great extensions and components, and the beauty of Joomla and this community is that you're able to leverage that to make it better for your customer. So just kind of in a recap about this, building communities are really more than the technology. Have an effective training and outreach. As I had mentioned, they are out county by county. You have to have some type of a bricks and mortar if you're going to have a community. It can't just be online. Even Facebook, I mean, they started in a college, okay, and they got a little groundswell buzz in that local community, and then they built from there. So if you can consolidate and create a focus with what your community is going to be, you know, I've seen them. There was kind of, I don't want to call it a drinking team, but a drinking bar-related social club, actually out in I think it was in Milwaukee, and they created a real successful little niche in that area, and then they grew from there. I think communities are really a wave of the future, because chambers of commerce are starting to adapt these. The average users on the web are starting to expect this type of connection. You know, in Facebook, I'm a retired musician from Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and I really had a wonderful career of like 13 years, and I moved out east and lived out there for 10 years, and hadn't seen a lot of my colleagues. Retired from the music business, and it was really neat. You know, about a year and a half ago, I got to connect with them via Facebook. I didn't really use Facebook for a long time. I just had it, and all of a sudden, like over a weekend, I got to connect with about 230 or 40 people that I really just, wow, this is really neat. And so social communities really can have a profound you know, impact in in our lives, and they already have. I mean, so. But it's all about nurturing these relationships, and then being able to communicate with folks. So that's who I am, what we did, and I'd love to take your questions after we kind of wrap this up. Did you get something fulfilling out of that, I hope?
All right. The second part of this, we're going to be looking at another project that we did, actually a couple other sites, but we're going to take a look at one of the first of a set of Drupal to Joomla migrations that we've done over the last year, about a year by now. And some really fun projects, some very large sites. You know, we got to the point, obviously you get to a certain point with sites where you can't just copy and paste. Otherwise you'd be there so long that you're obsolete by the time you're done. So we had to come up with some innovative kind of ways and really start building stuff from scratch, because something like this has really never been done. And so we're going to hopefully look at some of those today here quickly. One of the questions, again, coming back to the discovery phase, a lot of these problems that you're noticing in projects like that are the challenges that most large projects see. And it's not just unique to one project, even though they're radically different types of projects. So we have to address the why. Is this even worth it? And you know, moving from Drupal to Joomla has some benefits potentially for some organizations, some ease of use, workflows for non-technical users, stuff like that, flexibility in being able to, in certain cases, being able to more rapidly or more easily build new features or integrate new features. You know, as requirements change, as the community changes, as the site needs changes, and sustainability. In Joomla's past, this wasn't necessarily a factor because, as you remember, 1.0 to 1.5 to 1.6 was a mess. But you know, now moving in our new development cycle, maintaining the site and keeping the site up to date, you know, keeping a site that's always relevant because you're able to integrate the latest technologies is important. And we were actually handed a Drupal 5 site with this. That was one of the problems with it. One of the reasons why they came to us is because the site was so old, it had never been maintained, because it was going to be too painful to do that. And so they were literally getting hacked all the time, like every week or something like that. They'd call us frantically saying, you know, something's up. And for the longest time, we actually resisted, like, we don't do Drupal, so we don't want to maintain that. Let us work on this more quickly. But we ended up kind of taking over some of the aspects of that site, the original site as well. But you really, again, in this discovery phase, you have to answer why, or what are you going to do. If you don't have a plan, it generally ends up being a mess. And even when you do have a plan, it sometimes ends up being a mess. But it's always better to have a plan. So we had a migration process that has kind of come out of this, you know, in doing a couple of these sites so far. Obviously, you assess the site needs, and again, this is in relation to pulling data out of Drupal, putting into Joomla, mapping the content itself, what content's being brought over, where's the content going, what's its use, how is it consumed, and that dictates how we bring it over and what we do with it when we bring it over. And then, of course, we've built several custom migration scripts to do all of this automated. It takes several hours for the most part because it's very large sites. And then you usually do that a couple times because you're never going to get everything the first time. And we did this very first site, I think we did, you know, probably a dozen at least migrations where we'd migrate. We'd notice a couple things that were missing or that the client didn't tell us they wanted, which comes back to that discovery phase. And then we'd have to do it again. And, you know, eventually we got it all over and it looked nice. So never happens in the first time around, unfortunately. So assessing the site needs, and this is very, very important. We have to figure out what we're doing. We have this whole site here, and a site is not just made up of content. There's media all over the place. There's users, there's comments, there's forums, there may be social aspects to it. There's URLs themselves. How are we going to manage those? All the types of data that comprise a site needs to be considered before you can even think about migrating. And some of these we missed, you know. Some of these we missed comments the first time. We just assumed, well, it was Facebook comments at the time. We just assumed we don't need to do anything about those. It's just going to work. It didn't. So then we have to reconsider, how are we going to get this to work? and they ended up deciding Facebook comments they already weren't liking for several other privacy issues, and they wanted to move to Disqus. So then we had to consider how to get all the comments from Facebook into Disqus and then over to the URLs and everything like that. So it's very important to it's very hard sometimes to stop and pull yourself back from the fun of just jumping right in and doing cool new stuff. And you have to do sometimes this mundane stuff of just planning, and but it would pay off in the end for most of this. Once you've planned out what you're going to do, you're still not done planning. You still have to map your content. Once we've decided what content needs to come over, we have to decide where it's going to go. Are we going to use core content, com content? Are we going to use K2, or is this flexi content, another CCK? What solution provides the best options or capabilities that allows us to meet our current requirements and then grow into future requirements that may or may not come, but will most likely come as your organization changes, as the organization that you're working for grows. Especially from Drupal. Drupal, has anybody worked with Drupal? I should have asked that from the beginning. Okay, so you're familiar with their different content types that you can just create on the fly, and each one of them can have any different types of fields that you want. And so it's not like Joomla where there's going to be a title and a main body, and there may be some intricacies in that main body, but in general, that's it. In Drupal, one site is radically different from the other, and there's no two same configurations. So mapping content is very important, and figuring out where it's going to go in the system that you've chosen to use it, and making sure that, for some of the aspects, there are fields in Drupal that nothing, zoo, K2, com content, there are no equivalent fields. So, we had to kind of modify data on the fly to make it so that it could be stored correctly and used correctly in the Joomla site. And then custom migration. We built several migration scripts for the different sites that we've done. Each one is very unique because it's, again, totally different types of content, totally different fields, custom field types, content types, totally different. And so each one is actually, unique, and I say not so secret because we'll be putting these up on GitHub for everybody to just check out, and hopefully it will hopefully spark some interest and maybe some collaboration there with other people. I know the folks from Tech Joomla, we were talking with them yesterday. They're interested in doing some stuff there, so we're gonna probably be talking to them and maybe sharing some information there. And then again, repeat. You're not gonna get it right the first time, and I can say that confidently, having done this a couple times. You're really not gonna get it done in the first time. But it's easier the second time around, of course, because you've already done the planning, but you probably will be doing it a couple times. So here's the first site we did of a site migration, and this is what we brought over: 340,000 articles, 150,000 users. There were 15 unique content types. You have this article here, another article that has totally separate fields, totally separate purpose, another content type that was meant for media, another content type meant for galleries and stuff like that. 15 content types and about 87 content fields across those content types that all had to be accounted for within their content type, and then made sure that we have an equivalent that's able to handle it and able to present it in a reasonable manner over in Joomla. So,
PHP scripts that are
yes. Yes. Yeah, we took a database dump, put it through a script, and this took like 3 hours to move it all over. We did a lot of stuff on the fly, like URL rewriting and stuff like that, fixing images, because K2, when you upload an image, creates a cache of like 6 different image types, and Drupal doesn't. So we had to go create that cache of 6 different image types as we're bringing all the media over and everything like that. So a lot of stuff is built into that, specifically for K2. So this is what we used. K2, very heavily modified. I'm guessing there's probably only 40 to 50% of stock K2 left in it. But and a lot of that is additional content field types, extra fields for K2, rewriting all the views for it, stuff like that, for all these extra fields, stuff like that. Some custom social sharing plugins. I think Fotis is finally getting around to fixing his Facebook problems, but he actually ditched Facebook support about a year ago. So no any articles in K2, images wouldn't show up in Facebook. nothing would be pulled over. And for a news site, that's important. That's how they reach out to their readers, is by sharing socially, and other readers communicate with potential other readers, their friends on Facebook. And so having a sharp looking article in Facebook is very important for them. So we had to create custom social sharing templates. T3 template framework, and this was, we chose this because we had to move very quickly. They were getting hacked every week. We didn't have time to go through lengthy design process and stuff. So we chose T3 because it made it very easy. Most template frameworks are very easy, but this was even, T3 is much more easier to add module positions and stuff like that. You know, Gantry is very easy to do that too. It's like 3 lines or something like that. This is 1 line, so it's obviously faster. So we choose T3. Secure Live, as Chris mentioned, Secure Live is mandatory for every site that we host, and is very crucial here. Truthout has not gotten hacked since we put Secure Live on it, even when we put Secure Live on the faulty Drupal site. We still get about 1,200 to 1,500 hacking attempts a day, and nothing's ever gotten through. And of course, Joomla 2.5, we started on 1.7, and it's been migrated through to 2.5 right now, the current release. So, what's different about K2? Multi-author attribution, which is something that nobody else really did very well. Zoo did it somewhat, but didn't really do it. So, we've written some kind of little customizations to the authors so that we could have multiple authors per article. Because then these are journalists and they want their credit, and you know, if they don't get their credit, they're not happy. So multi-author attribution. Obviously, we rewrote most of the K2 templates so that we could have all of our custom fields, all of that stuff in there, and where we wanted it, not stuck at the bottom where all the K2 extra fields always end up at. And several custom extra fields that K2 didn't have to, again, account for data that was present in Drupal that was not available in K2. So let's look at some of these. Multi-author, you can see some of these here. If you look, we actually have 2 authors for each article, and again, on the article page itself, you can see, you know, we have an option to go to that author's page and see the stuff. We actually had to do some interesting stuff where we actually took the way K2 works with tags and kind of replicated that to work with authors, because that many articles, having it search through the database to find all the articles for a specific author, it was so time consuming. It'd run for like 5 minutes and then time out. It never actually rendered a page because it was still searching through the database to make sure it got all the articles. So we actually created an extra table in K2 that serves as like an index, and every time you save an article, it you know, puts the article ID there and the user IDs of the authors there, so that it's much easier for K2 to find all the articles from a specific author. And it's the same way that K2 does tags as well, for obviously probably the same reasons. And that's worked out quite well for us. Modifications to K2 templates. Again, some of these, oh, wrong way. Some of these are extra fields. You know, the source, this is actually a source. It could be Truthout, it could be a syndicated article or something like that that they found important. What type of article it is. These are all extra fields that you normally wouldn't get in, say, a category view, as this is right here. And we put them there. These are all extra fields. There's about 20 different copyrights that may or may not be used for each individual article. Multiple author profiles, stuff like that. So we had to rewrite a lot of the K2 templates in order to get our extra fields where we wanted them, and then not have them all appear at the bottom of the article where they're traditionally kept for K2 articles. So that was another interesting aspect of that. So what's next? We've done a couple of these sites for the Truthout organization. They have a fairly large family of sites, all very large sites. And so we've migrated all of them. We'll be putting our migration scripts up on GitHub more just so that people can see them. There is multiple options for migrating from WordPress to Joomla. There's several options for migrating from Joomla to Drupal. But if you start in Drupal, you're locked there. You cannot leave until now. So we want to put that out there and allow other developers to come up with ideas and contribute back, and allow other Joomla shops to offer Joomla as an option to clients that are not very happy with Drupal but are feeling locked in because there's no option to really leave without practically rebuilding their site from scratch, and hopefully automating some of this. we put up several blog posts on some of the other aspects of this, the management aspects, a lot of the planning processes, a lot of the other considerations that you have to take into account when doing this. It's a large undertaking. I believe it's larger than the My Puget Sound as far as budget goes, or just as large. And so, there's a lot of thought in multiple different areas that needs to go up, and we put several blog posts up there. Some more might end up there as well, and then hopefully more migrations. This has been some interesting projects. Something that we when we first started, we had to search all over, see if anybody else had ever done it, and we're trying to find somebody that had done it. So maybe we could work, share some information with them. We couldn't find anybody. So we've had to build all this stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to use it again for some more migrations, and we've gotten some contacts for that. But definitely keep an eye out for some blog posts, some more blog posts on some of these ideas that we didn't have time to expand on today. And if you're interested in it, I'm more than happy to go through the code with you today. We're still doing some cleanup, removing site-specific details and stuff like that, and then we'll be putting them on GitHub for everybody to use. So, any questions? That's it, I think. Yeah, that's it.